Okay, we know. It's taken us forever, but today we are finally reviewing Arcs. And if you want to save a little bit of time, this game is just so
Arcs is the latest blockbuster from board game design trio Cole Wehrle, Kyle Farron, and Leader Games. In Arcs, you are playing a trick-taking 4X game where you're attempting to become the most powerful civilization in the universe. More on the trick-taking later. You're doing so by gaining court cards, declaring ambitions, conquest over your opponents, and overall controlling the board. So Arcs and all points earned in Arcs are focused around this concept of ambitions. Basically, Arcs is played over a number of chapters until one faction becomes so powerful they take over the galaxy. Ambitions are a galactic declaration stating that you will be the best at something for an entire chapter.
Arcs is one of Cole Wehrle's easiest games to teach, but one of his hardest games to actually master, and that's often because of this ambition system. Let's take Warlord for example. To achieve this ambition, you need to engage your enemy's fleets, destroy their ships in combat, and take their wrecks as trophies. At the end of the chapter, the faction with the most trophies will win this ambition. But the great thing about this system is that it's only 1 in 5 ways to gain power and achieve supremacy in Arcs.
That leads perfectly into our first Arcs positive, which is that the scoring is so variable and the paths to scoring are so branching that you can take many different strategies and still achieve success. Also, it's very difficult to try to telegraph too far into the future or plan too far ahead because the game state changes so frequently that you constantly have to adapt to your situation. While establishing a strategy, it is crucial to consider court cards. Court cards come in 2 flavors, guilds and voxes, and these are either moments or allies you can make politically to help you across your journey of galactic conquest. You can gain court cards by influencing them, adding your agents to the various court card in question. Then securing it by taking a court card that has a majority of your agents relative to any other player.
All of the other ambitions in Arcs involve taxing resources. And the way that you tax is by taking a tax action. Now, you can do that in 2 different ways. The first is by taxing one of your own cities that's located on a planet that produces a certain kind of resource. The other way you can do it is by having control of one of your opponent's cities, and then you can tax their resources and gain one of those. Every planet in Arcs has a different associated resource. It could be relics, it could be weapons, it could be fuel or materials, etc. When you tax one of your opponent's cities, however, you also get to take one of their agents as a captive, again contributing towards Tyrant, while the resources contribute towards Tycoon, Keeper, and Empath.
So there are 5 resources in the game of Arcs, and these resources are what take Arcs from a trick-taking game to more of an action planning game, as we alluded to earlier. Basically, each resource allows you to do something different between when you play cards and then take actions. The fuel lets you move for free. The material allows you to build. The rocket allows you to battle. The relic allows you to secure various cards in the court. And the psionic allows you to take an extra action. So as alluded to earlier, Arcs isn't really a trick-taking game. You are technically playing cards into a hand and the winner of that hand gets to lead the next hand. But it ends up being more action planning, and it has to do with those materials, those resources you're taxing from various locations. Effectively, when you tax these resources, you get to spend them on your turn after you play a card and before you take an action to do various things. The fuel allows you to move. Materials allow you to build or repair. Rockets allow you to battle. Relics allow you to seize or secure various cards from the court. And psionics allow you to take an extra action. Resources and the way they're implemented are just brilliant. What I mean to say is it's so smart having the thing that you spend to do extra stuff also be a criteria for scoring. It almost introduces this like behind the scenes push your luck where you can try to use them to do the extra stuff, but that might take away from your ability to win a lot of points. Or you can save them all for points, but then you're falling behind on the number of actions you take. Also, they're stored on your player board in various locations denoted by keys. Keys are rolled while attacking in a raid. If you raid a location, people can steal your resources, which make it contribute to their resources. Effectively, you are juggling points back and forth while also deciding if you want to spend them, risk keeping them, maybe have them stolen. It's just so smart.
All right, so now that we've mentioned that you can basically be space Vikings in this game, it's time to talk about combat. And combat in this game is so fantastically designed. Essentially, how it works is if you have ships that are in the same area as an opponent's pieces, either cities or starports or ships, you can take a battle action. When you take a battle action, you are going to select several of these dice up to the number of ships that you have. And you're going to choose from the blue skirmish dice, the red assault dice, or if you're engaging with cities or starports, the raid dice. Okay, so I love how they have addressed this problem in ARCs. Essentially, the way it works is for every ship that you have in the combat, you choose one die. You can choose from the blue skirmish dice, which have only a 50-50 chance of hitting, but 0 repercussions for rolling them. Or you can choose the assault dice, which are much more likely to do a lot more damage, but you're actually fairly likely to take damage back. And then you've also got the raid dice if you're attacking cities or starports, which allow you to steal your opponent's stuff and nuke their cities into oblivion.
So before we get into the core 7 actions of the game, and I do just mean 7 actions, I want to give credit where credit's due and just say this bifold player aid is probably the best player aid ever made. Any new player can pick this up and learn how to play the game super fast. But with that covered, why don't we help you out and give you those 7 actions? The 7 actions are build, repair, battle, move, secure, influence, and tax. Those actions are spread across 4 different suits of cards. Each of these cards has some of those actions in various combinations. For example, this construction card has build or repair. This aggression card has move, battle, or secure. This mobilization card has move or influence, and this administration card has tax, repair, or influence. Knowing that ARCS is a trick-taking game, your first thought might be, what if I get dealt a bad hand? And I have some good news for you, and some bad news for you. Every hand's a bad hand. Basically, the higher the card, the less little pips are on that card. Pips are a number of actions you get to do based on the actions listed on the card. The lower the card, the higher the pips. Meaning, if you play a low card, you'll get to do more actions. You only get to do that, though, if you lead the card or if the card you played is higher than the led card.
So we've talked a lot about how you score points by declaring and achieving ambitions, but how exactly do you do that? Well, first off, you have to have the initiative. And that means that you're the lead player and get to play the lead card. Now, when you do that, you get to choose any suit you want and take as many actions that are indicated on that card by these pips up here. But before you do that, you can declare an ambition. It has to be the ambition that is associated with that card, though, and that's indicated in the bottom corner. Now, ambitions are not tied to the suits that you play, but they're tied to the numbers. And luckily, the board has a very helpful display of the different ambitions and the numbers that they're associated with. So when you play a 2, you can declare Tycoon, or a 3, Tyrant, or a 4, Warlord, and so on. Now, you have to remember that declaring an ambition and playing the lead card is a tricky proposition because whatever number you play, whether it's a 7 or a 4 or a 2, you need to place this little marker on there that you've declared the ambition, and that card now turns into a 0, allowing all of the other players in the game to take advantage.
Now, after a card is led, you have 3 options. You can surpass, which is playing a higher card of a matching suit and taking all of the action pips on your card. If your lead card is a 0, that means any card can be followed and surpassed and do all of their pips. Next is a copy, which allows you to play a card face down and take a single action matching the lead suit. And last is a pivot, which is playing a completely separate suit and taking exactly 1 action from that suit. So regardless of what you do, whether it be surpass, copy, or pivot, you can spend an extra card, therefore an action, from your hand to seize the initiative. That means that regardless of who won the trick, you will get to play first next turn. Now, in our opinion, we alluded to it already, but this isn't really a trick taker. It's an action planning game, and it's better for it. If this was a raw trick taker, this game would be miserable. Those bad hands we talked about would be worse. The fact that you can take initiative from somebody else by wasting a turn is one of the coolest mechanics in the game, and it just requires you to burn a card. Also, the fact that you don't have to follow suit means if you don't want to get rid of a card that will give your opponent information, you can play that card face down to copy and just do whatever they did. Or if you want to take an action that doesn't match what the lead player took, you can just pivot and do whatever your action is. It also helps normalize bad hands because if you didn't get a certain suit that you want to take the actions of, you can copy someone else's card when they play it. We'll get into some final thoughts and criticisms later and also cover asymmetry lightly, but I do want to give credit where credit's due to Cole Worley and team and just say that the game here, as presented, this base game, is just so fantastic. I feel like it could be taught to almost anybody, but there's so much depth and complexity that the skill curve is really high. I also feel like it's just so snappy in terms of playtime at 2, 3, or 4 players, and it scales really well to 2, 3, or 4 players. This might be Cole Worley's best game as far as variable player counts as well as streamlined information is concerned, and I think that they deserve all the flowers they're getting for that. Content creators are widely calling this the best game of the year, and we'll see if that's true in a second, but first let's talk asymmetry.
So when it comes to asymmetry, both John and I agree that this is probably one of the best implementations we've ever come across. And essentially the way it works in this game is you're going to be drafting, which is great. And you're going to be choosing a leader, which gives you a pro and a con, as well as an asymmetric setup, and as well as a lore card, which is generally a passive benefit that you get throughout the game. Just the amount of cards that you get in the base game, as well as in the Leaders and Lore expansion pack, there is so much replayability. And if you don't really like the core game after your first few plays, you can unlock so much different storytelling and gameplay that'll last you pretty much forever. And if they want to come out with more expansions for asymmetry, there's like, the sky's the limit, basically.
So while the game has a lot to rave about, and we'll get there soon, I promise, I think that there's also things to be critical of, and it wouldn't be fair if I didn't call them out. The first and most glaring to me is with these deluxe ship minis. The whole way you show damage on a ship is whether the ship is laying down or standing up, and the edges of these minis make it so easy to accidentally knock them over, and they're so finagly, and I just wish those were structured better, like with sharper edges. Additionally, the stock or default buildings that come with this game are like little cardboard tokens, and I really, really wish they were nicer. You see I 3D printed some here, but wooden tokens, screen printed, or a resin set, kind of like the root clearing set would be really nice. Also, zoning off of areas that are out of play. I wish it was more visual and less like, oh, that planet just has a token on it kind of deal, because while it's readable after you've played the game once or twice, at least initially, it's hard to envision. Also, if you're falling behind and you're in last place or even just having a tough game, it feels like it's impossible to claw back. There's situations that you just can't come back from no matter what you do. And I understand you got into that situation, but if you're someone who doesn't like feeling too punished by a game, just keep that in mind before you make a purchase. And lastly, some feedback that I've heard is being on the receiving end of attacks is very difficult. I would genuinely argue that as long as you play around it, it's probably fine, but some people feel super punished being the defender in attacking situations. So just keep that in mind if you're someone who wants a less interactive experience. That all said, though, I gotta say, I think Jeff said it best.
Okay, we know. It's taken us forever, but today we are finally reviewing Arcs. And if you want to save a little bit of time, this game is just so awesome.